All right. Now we're recording. It's 5:01, so it's about time.
Right.
And it's sorry about that. 1 October.
Right. Yes. The first.
Well, for some reason there we go. They changed this around every week. So then I have to come in and just reset. That's not a big deal. It just, just leave it alone.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, huh?
Yeah, I'm not sure, who else uses it. I don't think anybody does, at least not this classroom, because now mostly everything is online.
Right.
All right. Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right, well, we'll get started then because we got time is short.
Okay.
I'm glad you said your mom?
My mother-in-law.
Your mother-in-law is okay.
Yeah.
All right, so chapter 9, right?
Yes.
All right, so let me talk first on a couple things. One is shout out to Monisha Howard for letting me know that I forgot to post the questions on Moodle.
Yeah.
I did send out the email, so you at least had them.
Yeah.
And you know that your scenarios this week is Unilever.
Yes.
All right. So the two questions, what from your readings are some accepted non-financial
Right.
measuring tools? Okay. So that implies you know what the financial measuring tools are. Okay.
Right.
I'm going to send this out probably tomorrow. I meant to get it out, but I got hung up in my normal job. So bear with me just a second. I'm clicking through something here. But what I want to do is show you a screen. If I can. All right, you should be seeing a document that says general types of financial measures.
Yes.
All right, so it's probably a little tough to see, so I'll see if I can zoom in a tad.
I can see it pretty good.
All right, yeah, let's, okay, well, yeah, that's really good now. Okay, so I'm talking in the question about non-financial, and you read in your text, you'll see what some of those are. Help
Yeah.
you out. The general types of financial is ROI, return on investment, return on sales, return on assets, annual return on equity. And then there's some others, growth in sales, growth in market share. So, the bottom line here is that as you're going through developing out innovation and you've done your global business plan, remember how you're taking that innovation to the market. You're expending resources.
Right.
And the whole idea here is as you're expending these resources, there's a fiduciary responsibility. If you're a public traded company, there is obviously an immense amount of responsibility put on you through the SEC and the like of tracking how you're doing. Now, the financial means are very, very straightforward. Okay, if you are spending more than you're receiving, you're not doing well. Okay, it's that old adage of make money and make more than you're spending. the thing that we're trying to get at here with the question, which gets back to the question that for this week is what are the non-financial measuring tools that can be used to determine innovation and entrepreneurial performance? Okay, now just a quick run through, you probably come up with about 3 to 5 right off the top of your head. And I would say go ahead and trust your judgment on that. But I will also tell you that your clever text, I'll hold it up to my camera.
Yeah.
Text gives you some. So, you know, that's kind of the clever thing here on a lot of these questions is you're going to find a lot of the information upon which to certainly base an answer out of your text.
Mm-hmm.
The second is how can an organization determine innovation and entrepreneurial performance is right there in your text. Okay. And so
Yes.
what I obviously am doing here is I'm kind of giving you a break on some of these questions of late because I know you're working on your papers, right?
Right.
Working on papers. The key is understand this isn't so much a scavenger hunt, though. Okay, go in and find, but as you'll see on question number 1 is I want you to pick one and then explain to me why you think
Right.
that measure is important. When you get into discussion number 2, how can an organization determine innovation and entrepreneurial performance? You'll see table 9.3 out of your text
Yeah.
gives you something.
I see. Yeah.
So again, you know, yeah, okay, you list one. All right, and so what? In other words, you might, if you give me one, you've answered the question at an average level.
Mm-hmm.
You take it one step further by telling me something about it, something that you think about it. Hey, it's a good measure, but not a complete measure. Hey, it's a measure, but I don't really think this works for the organization I'm in. You talk about it any way, shape, or form you want.
Right.
Show me that you kind of thought about it a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we talked through getting back to our computer. Let me go ahead and bring up the slides. Okay, everybody see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a gentleman by the name of Blaise Pascal. He lived in the 1600s. He didn't live very long. Of course, in those days, reaching the age of 40, you were considered a very old man, I guess.
Yeah.
But he was a French philosopher, mathematician, physicist. He developed something called a Pascal's wager that I think is very instructive. And it kind of fits within a couple of things I was thinking about this week. But it's an argument that brings forward to the human, we bet our lives that either God exists or he does not. So how is that wager laid out? Well, on this slide, I kind of talk it out. The wager has 6 parts to it, okay, and he's defining the rules. As he does that, he says in the end, it's a bet against eternal life of happiness for the possibility of gaining nothing. The wise decision then is to wager that God exists. If he exists, then you gain everything. Okay? If you lose and you bet that God does not exist, you're really no worse off in death than if you hadn't believed. So you bet against God, win or lose, you either gain nothing or you lose everything. So it almost sounds like a wager that uh, doesn't have the reward, um, but you've got to look long term. Okay, in the short term, you're going to live your life. If you live your life that he doesn't exist, in the end, you're going to die. And then what do you have? If it turns out that God does exist, you traded in short-term fun in this life for an eternity of damnation.
Right.
Conversely, you live your life that God does exist. You're trading in a short-term period on this earth of relative pain. In other words, you're not chasing after the trappings of this world, but you gain eternal life of happiness when you reach your final reward.
Right.
So, in the end, it's kind of that old premise. A commandant of the Marine Corps once said it: "Damned if you do, damned if you don't, or never equal. Pick one and move out." You're not going to be presented with an obvious decision. Think back to when you, I don't know, in your own personal life, made a decision to enter a career field, get married, make a major purchase decision.
Right.
Were you 100% certain that was the right decision? If you were, then congratulations, you're one of the rare. But there's always kind of that nagging, thought in the back of your mind, hey, is this really who I want to spend my life with?
Right.
In the end, you made a long-term, hopefully a long-term, decision on it. And that's really kind of the approach that I wanted you to think about as you went in and read chapter 9. Okay. Last week, everybody did a good job on the questions. Those were, again, straightforward, nothing really surprising. Kind of made it a scavenger hunt. Show me a couple things. One of which is, again, when I give you a concept, if you could find the definition in the text, man, put that in your paper, okay? And then base your response off of it. The global business plan is simply bringing that innovation to market. It's called global because it wants you to account for all the aspects of the decision. Financial, resources, in the case of human capital, you name it, okay? It doesn't speak to it being global as in international. You can have a global business plan and still sell your innovation in the States.
Yeah.
Okay, and some people had a hard time with that. And I want to make sure that distinction is clear. The idea here is that as a business, you're going to look at that specific innovation and derive a business plan off of it that you're going to go forward with. And so in the case of a company that's already established, that already has a business plan, and they develop a new innovation, then they're going to do a global business plan for that innovation. Okay? The second question, which talked about types of organizations, sole proprietorship, an S-chap, you name it. That was kind of a scavenger hunt. Just go on, do a simple internet search, and everybody did a good job as to finding it. Go back and take a look at what I shared with you, and then match that to what you put down. Just make sure you're tracking on some of these, because again, part of this is the text kind of skips over it, but how you organize is huge on whether your organization is going to succeed. If you are building that innovation off of your personal responsibility and you organize as a sole proprietorship, then you're inheriting a lot of risk if there is a problem or a legal matter that comes out of somebody's use or misuse of that innovation. So there's certain protections that are out there. This is a capitalist society, and so the capitalism means the means of capital, in other words, the monetary resources that are going to help fund your innovation and bring it to market, is between you and that other person. The government, in very limited cases, isn't involved. And that's one of the reasons why this country can do some amazing things, because people will take risk and convince others to fund them based on personal relationships, not somebody in Washington, D.C., who may not have any dog in the fight making the decision with your tax money. People looked at Orville and Wilbur Wright and said, there's no way two guys who make bicycles are ever going to figure out how to make an aircraft heavier than air. In 1903, what'd they do? Anyway, so follow that up with your scenario study of Ryanair. I really liked what a lot of you did. Anthony, you did this and a couple others. You went in and you found the protagonist. You found Mr. O'Leary. That was excellent. That was superb. Many of you went in and saw that in the case of Ryanair, the gap analysis was finding those people that don't want to spend a lot of money on an airline ticket, that don't necessarily want all the expenses that go into it. I don't need you feeding me a lunch on the aircraft and then putting that part of that money or part of that cost into my ticket. I'll just eat lunch at home before I get on the flight and what have you. So in the case of Ryanair, believe it or not, they kind of stole the idea, open innovation, if you will, from Southwest Airlines. And that is make it a no frills, very basic, minimize costs and the like. And if you go in and read the PDF file I give you as feedback, you'll see a list of about 6 to 8 things that Ryanair does where their innovation was really subtraction, not addition. They took a concept and necked it down. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, that was a good point. Yeah, that you brought up, because I didn't really recognize that at first. But yeah.
Yeah, you did good. And you go through and you do your SWOT analysis. Be very careful when you say, I don't know of any threats out there, because there always are. And for Ryanair, the two major threats, and this is the case for any airlines, is your competitors and the government. Okay, so think back a couple years ago. Remember when United Airlines was in trouble for dragging a guy off of an aircraft because they had overbooked the seats? Well, they said they pulled him off because he was belligerent. Well, he was belligerent because they were pulling him off the flight. Okay, so if I've paid for a ticket and I'm sitting in my seat and all of a sudden you tell me I got to get off, yeah, I might be a little at you. Right. And if you're not explaining it very well, and hey, I want to get home, so I may not be interested in a later flight, then now we got a little bit of an issue. In the end, he was compensated and things kind of worked out. But in the end, the U.S. government was getting ready to get involved again. And there's always been this sine wave, ups and downs of regulatory and deregulation of the airline industry. And ultimately, it's a fine line, because on the one hand, you want a lot of deregulation, let people figure it out, to include, hey, let me go to a local airport, and if somebody is a private pilot and they got an extra seat on a private plane they're flying, why can't I go up to them and say, hey, let me give you half your gas money and I'll fly with you because you're going where I want to go. Right. There should be no reason. Well, the FAA doesn't allow that, and it's heavily regulated. You kind of think of Uber, if you will, for airline. The other problem, though, is that if you've only got a handful of carriers, that kind of becomes a monopoly, and then you kind of get at the subject of their whims of whoever that monopoly is. So it's a balance. Anyway, So, but in the end, if you ever think of an organization, two of your threats right off the bat is going to be what your competitors' intentions are, and what is the political legislative effects. Okay, right now I'm an e-cigarette manufacturer. Okay, what is one of my threats now with electronic cigarettes?
Well, hey, the news coming out that it's bad. You know, it's related to certain illnesses. So they're
Yeah.
saying.
So the threat is an issue with my product, okay, and market demand. But look at what's happening. What did the president start talking about? What did New York City just do as it relates to availability of electronic cigarettes? Just banned them, didn't they?
Right. Yeah, they banned.
Okay. Well, okay, it's never a good situation when your product is being banned,
Right.
particularly if there's no real compelling reason to. You're penalizing me on the suspicion of. Believe me, I'm not paid by the e-cig manufacturers. I don't vape. I don't do any of that stuff.
Right.
I'm not a big fan of it because the vanilla, cream, sugary, whatever stuff that a lot of these guys like to vape just drives me up the wall. But when you look at it from a pragmatic standpoint, it's always got to be out there to be careful. Now, of course, there's other threats, weather effects, financial backing, loss of key staff. I mean, you can identify probably a dozen of them right off the bat. If there's really nothing to make out of those, then that's fine. Just something to think about. Okay, so next week you got a paper, right?
Yep.
All right, and everybody should be tracking. Here's what everybody's writing on. You're still doing the postal service.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't burned any of my mail lately, so I'm a happy man.
Right.
I got one of those letters. I got some of my burned mail. It was funny.
Yeah.
It was all crispy. There was nothing wrong with it, and it did. I think all of my packages came through.
All right.
Yeah. It was just. Anyway, so that paper's got to be uploaded no later than 23:59 on Sunday, 13 October.
No. Okay. Is it 23 or 13?
The 13th.
13 October.
I thought, yeah.
Oh,
I said 23:59.
Oh, okay, yeah.
On Sunday the 13th. I hope I said that. They can catch me. I had a long day at work today.
Gotcha.
So, okay, so you're normally putting stuff in. You'll still do Wednesday night post, couple responses to your fellow students. Saturday, you'll still have your case study, which is going to be your last case study. And because week 8, you won't have to worry about any of that. You'll just have to make sure your paper's done. And that should be it. I think the case study is on local motors in industry, maybe?
For the last one? Yeah.
I think so. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but
yeah.
I think that's the case. Let me just double check real fast to make sure. Okay, so week 8, I got a mistake on here. It says Xerox. That can't be right. Okay. I'll double check that. But anyway, the bottom line is for this week what you got to do. You got your 2 questions, your scenario study.
Right.
And next week you've got a paper due. All right. So let's get back to my slides real fast so you're okay on this. Chapter 9. So we're talking international opportunities. And the authors give you 3 to 5 thoughts on it. One is that today's environment, there's fewer controlled economies, which means fewer barriers to entry than there was in the past. That's not to say there aren't any, but even economies like Russia, China, are loosening some controls and are allowing some. That's what a lot of the tariffs lately from this administration on China has been all about.
Right.
Where we can't even sell food because China has so much high tariffs. Okay, SMEs means small to medium enterprise, and large corporations need to act locally and think globally. So, with international consequences to your actions through media and the like, you need to be very careful what you do. You think, hey, this is what I'm doing is just limited to this area, and you'll find out real fast you could have some global repercussions. Just ask somebody who removes a couple guys from a Starbucks or a Denny's restaurant a few years ago. Think of a cake or a photographer who decide not to do a wedding cake or wedding photos for a particular couple that have an alternative lifestyle.
Right.
Okay, location becomes a factor of limited importance because in this day and age, we're so interconnected in a lot of ways. There's still importance in developing these out, but in this case, the authors want to let you know that it also means that organizations that can embrace an innovative strategy will increase the likelihood they will increase performance. It's funny that the text gives you know thyself, know thy enemy. Because for Marine Corps, we spend almost every other year in our surface reading Art of War by Sun Tzu. I guess about every school I had to go to, I had to read the same book to the degree I was like, come on, you give me something else to read. It's not to say it's not worth your while. It certainly is. But at some point you get a little tired of it. So that's why I put the copy of the photo there. Okay, some key environmental factors to consider. And there's that political legal environment again. Economic environment, obviously clear. You want a stable economy. You've got to have a state of economic development. If there are a lot of rules barring entry, if you think of what's going on in New York City right now with taxi cabs, in order to run a taxi cab in New York City, you have to buy a medallion. Medallion's only, $7,500 or whatever it was, 75,000 maybe. Well, you can't just walk up and buy one. You have to get one off of somebody else who has one. Well, in this case, those medallions go for about $1 million.
Whoa.
And so it isn't as easy to get into the taxi business as one would think. That's one of the reasons why some enterprising and innovative spirits developed a concept called Uber.
Yeah.
They saw a gap and they exploited it. And now it's unhinging the cab business. And a lot of folks up in New York City that bought a $1 million medallion are paying a price for it now because they're not getting the ridership they need in order to be able to pay all that debt off. So it's interesting and intriguing to see how economies develop out. Sociocultural, it's how people are connected, how they interrelate, how we view certain things, and then of course technological. Whether you have electricity or not, whether you have running water or not. These all things sound basic, but in some parts of the world, it's very problematic. In the end, it is your ability to understand and adapt on all these factors, and that's where learning becomes critical. Okay, in the future, global market conditions. Well, why is that? International collaboration, why is that important? lack of confidence in economies. Why is that? And I keep saying all these questions of why, because I want you to get in there and read what some of these are. Don't just plow over those.
Mm-hmm.
Get in there and read the text, and then think it through. Just kind of see why growth and environmental and sustainable development is important. This is called studying, okay? Not just reading the words, but taking time to think through and consider them. So I just encourage you on that. Anthony, you ever heard of the Golden Arches theory of conflict prevention?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I love to show my students because Thomas Friedman, who is a remarkable author, certainly one worth your while to read, in his book, The Lexus and the Olive Tree, gives you the Golden Arches theory of conflict prevention, which says that no two countries that both had a McDonald's franchise in each country have fought a war against each other since it got its McDonald's. So the idea here being that the more economically interconnected countries get, the less chance of it going into armed conflict. So the idea being give everybody a vested interest in each other, tend hopefully maybe to work out our problems. Just on something fun, I like to show a graphic of where countries with McDonald's are, in this particular case, where they are not. And as you can see, countries without a McDonald's are shaded in blue. Very few countries.
Right.
Okay. Obviously, the number of franchises in in America outnumber anywhere else. We've got quite a few. That said, it's interesting to see that even China has almost getting up close to 1,000 McDonald's restaurants in their own country. For a lot of the Marines, the menus are the same, but they're different.
Yeah.
I remember going to a McDonald's in Sierra de Palma de Mallorca, and they would sell beer, cerveza, on the menu of that McDonald's. So you could get a beer with your Big Mac. I asked the person, was that called a McSuds? And they didn't think that was very funny. Okay, and then your text takes you into ethics, which is really a great portion, and they didn't really get into it as much as they should. I'm going to hustle this up because we're almost out of time. But that defined set of key principles of a code that explains what is right and what is wrong is really critical, and it has to take into account these things, cultural diversity. It has to enhance or add value to local communities. If you've got ethical behavior that doesn't add to the value of the local community, then you need to rethink what you're doing.
Right.
Okay, general awareness of the practices. And I sent out an article that's kind of worth your while, and it's a little dated, but innovation, rule breaking, and the ethics of entrepreneurship. If you ever want to know how to write an abstract, here's one for you that talks out how to do it. It's a synopsis of what you say in the article, not hey, I'm going to cover this, cover that, cover X, Y, and Z. Okay? But it's interesting that a feature of ethics in entrepreneurship is people that are consistently breaking the rules. Think about that when you're hiring and the people in your organization. The innovators typically will break the rules.
Right.
Okay? And if your organization frowns on that, then don't be sitting around asking how come people aren't innovating if you're punishing rule breakers. Anyway, very interesting article. Certainly, hey, Lance, certainly worth your time.
Mm.
All right. Okay. I told you about performance measures, right?
Right.
One of your questions are non-financial See the 8 that are listed on page 164.
Right.
And then pick one and tell me about it. Innovation performance. I hear ESPN back there, Anthony. Come on. Innovation performance, the level of success achieved in the 3 forms, okay? Take a look at table 9.3.
Right.
Okay. The rest of it talks about the future, and we talk about manufacturing in America, something that I've always been intrigued with. In 2014, a presidential study came out and ran through some of it. And what's happening is where we're going. Your text talks about Mr. David Birch, who is a consultant, and he has come out and identified that the only way to learn about entrepreneurship is by starting a company and serving as an apprentice. In other words, in order to be innovative, you have to learn to be innovative. The only way you can is by working for an entrepreneur. So it kind of flips it out. And David Birch is an interesting guy to think about because he is all about the digital money, the Bitcoin and the like. He's a very acute observer of internet and social networks. So again, getting back to what is the future that looks like. When I talked about manufacturing, it's easily heard that we're not making things in the States anymore. Not quite true. And so what are some of the dynamics? In 2015, I identified, not me, but through research, 5 trends that will impact things like reshoring, bringing back, or nextshoring, bringing back companies from overseas, capital investment like. Okay, now there's 10. Okay, Internet of Things is a big thing. Predictive maintenance, in other words, a piece of equipment that tells you it's about ready to fail. We already see that. Caterpillar does that.
Right.
Business to business to consumer, supply chain and the like. So I'll send these slides out because we're about ready to lose our meeting time. I think I got 3 minutes left. But don't just blow off this chapter because it's not just international. It is things that still apply here in the States, but things to take a look at. And again, remember, you're always looking for those gaps. You're looking for those opportunities. You certainly want people using your product, I think. And in the end, it becomes opportunities. Now, it's up to you to determine whether those opportunities are worth the resourcing and the risk that's aside. 3D printing. Okay, we'll see what that does. It's been very intriguing so far. The next 5 to 10 years are going to make it really interesting to see. And then this idea of reshoring, bringing operations back to the U.S. All right, Anthony, you got any closing remarks?
No, you pretty much covered everything.
All right. Well, I'm appreciative of you joining us. Lance, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're fine. No, that's fine. We talked about some of the work from last week. I had to fix the questions for this week. I didn't put them on Moodle. You got them on the email. Talked a little about Ryanair, the innovation being what he took out, what he minimalized, and those are assorted things. When I say assorted things, I'm talking about the costs that add up on your airline ticket, whether that's the free bag of pretzels or the like.
Yep. You don't get too much of free anything nowadays on these airlines.
Yeah, and that's a future gap, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're going to see, hey, everybody was all about fast food, and every now and then you kind of want to do a sit down, full course meal. You kind of want the trappings.
Right.
Um, I would say that, soon we may see a
Go
company
full circle.
decide to decide to, bring some of those back.
Yeah.
Um, it's you got to do something because I'll tell you right now. I mean, I don't like to fly anymore. It used to be fun.
Right.
Now it's just kind of a pain. I know I'm an old fart.
Can't take more than one bag. You gotta get charged for it.
Well, and they're always oversold and everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, less than a minute.
All right.
Anthony, great to see you. Good luck on your paper.
Thank you.
What I was going to show you here, Lance, is what week are we? Week 5 was the scenario. So